Welcome to the anthropology and art of the astral plane. Today we've got a very different presentation for you, of a different class than the other presentations I've done. I think the channel is starting to take form, and this is the first video where I actually start putting stuff together and discussing pretty deep theories out of the data that have been obtained through my Psychonautic vision sessions. So today's presentation is entitled The Ancestors of the Stars, an ancient class / race / culture of extra-dimensional beings from before the time of the stars, discovered on the astral plane. So, what was the initial contact with the ancestors of the stars? Well, my initial contact with the ancestors of the stars came during a vision sequence that I had. I discuss, in my introductory video how to have these types of visions of the spiritual realm and the astral planes and the mental planes. So you really should go back and watch the very first video on this channel if you haven't had the chance to do that yet. But again, a really brief summary of how I do this is I close my eyes in a dim or dark room. I look for patterns or flashes of light on the back of my eyes. Sometimes I have a little cannabis in my system. A lot of times I don't. The cannabis can help. It doesn't always help. Honestly, the cannabis isn't what causes the visions sometimes. It's your mind that causes them. The cannabis can really amplify them, but I don't know why it sometimes works really well and sometimes it doesn't. Perhaps that'll be the subject of its own video at some point. And when you see these patterns on the back of your closed eyelids, you kind of focus on them as best you can, and that's where your meditation skills come in. I'm not the greatest meditator, but at least I learned a little bit about focus and meditation, just using basic meditation techniques where you try to either sit there and every time you have a thought you just notice it and then let it go, or you try to focus on something despite all your mind's attempts to distract you. And that focus does help when you want to focus on these seed images on the back of your closed eyelids. And when you start getting good at this, they'll expand outward into full 3D movie scripts that play out before you, almost like remote vision or remote viewing in a way. And I honestly think there's some kind of tie-in between what I do and what remote viewers do. Again, that should be a topic of its own video, but I do think there are different classes of things because remote viewers are not often focused on the things that I'm focused on, and they're not seeing the things that I'm seeing, and I'm not choosing targets to go see, although I could potentially. But anyway, so my initial contact with the ancestors of the stars was this image I had during a vision session, the first of its type. I've had thousands of visions. I've never seen this before. And it was just a giant, epically large star. And I was on the surface of a planet that kind of had a brownish, desertish, rocky landscape. And the sun was so big that it filled up the whole horizon. It was kind of a reddish orange sun, like in this picture. And it was huge, and it wasn't our sun. And there were fireballs coming up off the sun, and snakes of flame, and it really was like a hell world. It was so close to this gigantic sun, and it was just getting covered by these flames. And that was my initial contact with the ancestors of the stars, because then I had a channeling session. Again, I'm a bit of a channel. I've been channeling for 10, 15, 20 years, honestly. What I call the universal data stream. I don't talk about it that much, but I do channel, and so I channeled and asked about what this vision meant, and I got this message that basically said, it wasn't the best channel I've ever done by far at all, but it basically said I had initial contact with what's called the ancestors of the stars, or ancestors from before the time of the stars. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. So the saga continues. So I switched to the next slide. So I asked in my mind to have more visions about these ancestors of the sun. And I had a whole series of visions that served as evidence in favor of the existence of this cultural group / species / spiritual species / being type that I am tentatively calling the ancestors of the stars. And interestingly, this is kind of what the channel is meant to be about in its ultimate sense, or at least one of its ultimate senses. There's more than one, but it's to use all this data and all these vision records I have of the astral plane to figure stuff out, to figure out secrets, to find cultures, to understand the anthropology of the spirit realm. And yes, I know that these may be symbols in my mind, and there may not actually be these beings out there, but then again, I don't think it's that simple. I think it's much more complex than that. I think these spirits exist on their own too, and I also think they're filtered through like the experiences of your life. So while I'm probably seeing real spiritual realities, I think they're being filtered and shown to me in terms of symbols from my own experiences. But I honestly don't know what the real truth is. I could theoretically just be seeing real beings out there in a different dimension that you can't perceive until you can perceive it by using shamanic type techniques, like the type of techniques that I try to teach on this channel. I mean, it's all real. Like, I'm having these visions and I'm taking them as seriously as if they were fact. Like, I fully understand that they may be symbols at some level, and they may be also symbols and truth at the same time. But as an anthropologist of the spirit realm, I'm taking them fully seriously and then making my theories based on what I actually see, as if they were real beings, and they may or may not be. But even if they aren't, there's still serious value in an approach like this. But I tend to think the answer is mixed. I think they're real beings, but they're being presented through the symbols that exist already in my mind, that have been populated by my exposure to the outside world and the social world. So I mentally asked in my head, before some vision sessions I had, these were, I don't know, a week ago or something, to talk to me and show me evidence in favor of the existence of this pretty interesting hint I got of a group called Ancestors of the Stars. And the first thing I got was this image called what I call the Dragon Web, and that was on January 12th, and so today is 22nd, so that was 10 days ago. But I've had a number of visions since then. And the first one was just kind of, I saw this, don't worry, this doesn't look all that impressive, but the images and visions I got get much more impressive as the video goes on, but I want to give you all the evidence. So the Dragon Web was basically, I was in kind of a blackest deep space type vision, as usual, it often is, and there's like this grid of either greenish like you have here, or like silver blackish, like geometric shapes that were underlying and kind of built into the fabric of space. And what would happen is they were very geometric, like very equal, in very much the way you see here. This was kind of like what I saw, not nearly as impressive, but at least you see the shapes that I saw. And different sections would light up in different colors, and it was clearly a communication system. Like, if you can learn to decode it, like my mind, or some part of my mind, a spiritual part of my mind, was trying to communicate with me by flashing these different lights on different sections of this grid, which obviously meant like either different words or different letters or different concepts. Now, did I ever figure out what it meant? No, and I don't really know how I could without like more visions, but I did get more visions, so I did learn more about this. So on to the next slide. So already I've got a number of things from this. Like, I've got what's called the Peacock script. That's the first one I got over there on the left, and basically you draw like a feather, and then you draw in a color on a certain section, and there's like 28 sections, and section 1 means A, section 2 means B, section 3 means C, etc. And at the end there's like a space and a period. So 26 letters of the alphabet plus space and a period. And I kind of got that mapped out there. Like, if you look at the bottom right hand corner of the picture on the far left, you've got it says like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So those are the letters. And I was kind of shown in my vision that it's like a ceremonial script I can use to summon the power of this dragon web that I saw. And all this is going to get important here as we go later on in the video. Then the second slide, the slide in the middle, I took some more symbols that I saw in my mind, which follow a similar pattern, and then I created a grid there. And like each place you see a colored red line, that means it's that letter. So on that first square on the top left hand corner, you've got A, B, C, and D. D is the red line that's crossed. And the second one, the red line is R, and what that really says is dragon script. And it's like a ceremonial script that potentially I'm supposed to or could use to contact or draw like ceremonial art or religious art to these ancestors of the star. And then see how you've got all the red lines on the top and then you've got the blue lines at the bottom? Well, if you took away that grid underneath it, which you use the grid to tell which letter it is, and the grid looked very much like the original dragon web, back on the slide before this. If you take those away and you just draw a line between the different spots of color where each of the letters is, then you get a further, deeper level of the ceremonial script where it starts to look more like a sigil. And that's kind of how sigils were made in the first place, in a similar way. But those 4 lines at the bottom just say dragon script. That's how it reads. And then on the section on the far right, you've got Dragon Script C, and that's another vision I saw of how to do this Dragon Script. Is very ornately. It's meant to be a ceremonial script, and I thought that was pretty interesting. I never had a vision that showed me how to do ceremonial script before, but I had it for this after the Dragon Web. So to the next slide, you got a close-up of the Peacock script, and there's an actual key to how to do it if you're interested in that. So I'll move on. Got a close-up now of that, again, that says Dragon Script. So you got A, B, C, and D. The D is where the first red line is on the top left corner. Like, that's the way you read this. Like, each square is A, B, C, D, and you go over to the right, E, F, G, H, and you go below I, J, K, W, or whatever. Sorry, because I don't know my alphabet. But and then if after you do that, you can draw these lines in between the different letters on the gridded display, and then you can get a more sigil-like thing. Those lines mean the words dragon and script. I can write any words with this grid. And it's meant to be a ceremonial script, kind of a religious script. It's interesting that I'm getting sent this sort of thing in visions, like something wants me to make a religious script. Now, what does that suggest? Something wants me to make a religion. And it's by far from the first time I've had visions where it's been suggested that I should create a religion of some sort or another. Now, this is what I do when I want to. Weed affects me very differently than regular people. Like, I almost never get high off this, but what it does do is it makes it very easy for me to switch into a trance when I want to switch into a trance. And I'm very much like that these days. Like, I'm very borderline shamanic in my day-to-day activities. Like, you're watching a person that's either going to have an epic success or an epic crash out. Like, all my traits and qualities and my innate traits and qualities are getting intensified, and one of those traits is my shamanic spiritual trait. And this is one of the ways it's expressing itself is through this and through the videos that I make. And yeah, this is all leading to something hopefully good. I think it could go either way. Just an epic crash out, or an epic breakthrough of some sort. We'll see. But this is so I can get in a trance easier. That's the way it is. All right, so on to the next slide. So there's a close-up of the dragon script. Looks nice to me. It's ornate. You can kind of use any colors you want on the outside, like as long as they're geometric shapes. And the original vision I had, those colors were like rainbows, and unfortunately the rainbow's got like real political significance these days, so I don't want to be sending out signals or symbols that I don't mean to send out, so I can't really use the rainbow because the rainbow's been adopted. And although I'm not opposed to the rainbow, like, it's not what I'm trying to project for my own thing because I'm straight, so but I'm not against the rainbow at all, really. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that. So on to the next slide. So we've got another image I had after that was I had an image of these star ancestors priests. And what was there's a lot of things that were interesting about this vision. First was this fan that this priest is carrying, and I drew like a separate vision of the fan on the left, and then on the right it showed you how it worked. It's like how they would use it in the vision is they take it like this and they kind of do this with their hand or that with their hand, and then the fan would swing open and form a full circle like a star or a sun. And they're awesome. And I was on the weed that day, so I was in a trance almost the whole day, and the whole day I was seeing these things like these spinning fans in lots of different colors, like neon green, but primarily like orange and dark sunset like orange. But I also saw it in neon green, and I may have seen it in a few other colors that I don't remember, like purple, purplish pink, kind of like a sunset in the summer kind of thing. And the interesting thing about this figure in the middle that I call the Star Ancestors priest is, first of all, it's a priest. Like, what? Again, if you got a priest, then that suggests there's potentially a religion. Like, they're a priest of a religion, the religion of the Star Ancestors. And I don't think that guy's a Star Ancestor because he looks like a human, like with blonde hair. And that's what I expect a Star Ancestor to look like, but don't really know. And then he literally had rainbow paint on his face. Again, back to the rainbow. I don't know what that meant, but I took it in the vision as all the colors of the rainbow as representative of light itself, which, again, stars tend to make light, so I found that interesting. And, like, why is this star being a human? And I don't think this is a star being, so does this star being come after the star beings? Is like a point in the future after the star beings existed that these priests are worshipping the star beings, or what? But anyway, on to the next slide. Next vision I had was I had this vision kind of out in space where they're like drones or something carrying these fan-like things, and all at the same time they would flip them open out in deep space. There are like, you know, hundreds of millions or whatever of these drones, and when they all worked in unison, they created what looked like a star, but it was like an illusion. It was meant to be either one of two things. It was either like a religious rite or a symbolic projection, like of the star, which again could represent the ancestors of the star beings, or it was like a deceit or an illusion to make it appear there was a star when there wasn't one. I tend to think this was a religious rite because of the context of the other visions I had in this set of visions, and also the questions that I asked. Pretty sure it was a religious rite, and that's pretty interesting because now we're getting evidence, strong evidence of the existence of like a religion that worships what's called the ancestors of the stars, and a lot of it is based on this idea of light. It's also based on the idea of suns and stars. So on to the next image. So we got what I've called the Dragon Light Collector and Channeler. This was the vision I had in deep space. There was like these gray high tech, somebody had built this out in the middle of space. Like these walls were gray, and on them were these geometric shapes, and then they were all gray by default, but they would light up in different colors, and kind of like that original dragon web I showed you. And so it appeared to be either a communication, probably a communication of some sort, but also at the same time I got this sense that it was like collecting and channeling some sort of like spiritual or star being energy, and the different, you know, shapes would light up in different colors, and it would just all, this thing's way bigger than what I drew. Like I might have drawn a tiny section of something that was like millions of miles in length, and it was just like collecting and channeling this light, and as it collected it, it would display different patterns across its surface. And it's important to notice that these look kind of like snake scales, which again, dragons are like snakes writ large with wings, and also snakes are reptilians. Interesting point. So on to the next slide. So the next thing I saw was a pyramid complex of the ancestors of the stars, and it was this kind of funky, like trippy, cool, like shiny metallic looking pyramids on a planet that had like a rocky type surface, and the sky was just blackish with stars. And then you had these multiple pyramids that were different colors, and inside them they had like, they just shone with the colors of, with little stars, not that little, but you can see the scale there. These were like the size of our pyramids in Egypt, and these stars would light up different colors, like, and I don't know what it meant, but again, look, you've got what looks like religious complexes, or at the very least symbolic complexes that represent stars. So again, more strong religion, or more strong evidence that there's a religion of the ancestors of the star beings inside the deep mind, astral, mental planes. And again, as an anthropologist, I'm just analyzing this as though it were, the way it demonstrates itself. And again, I understand that these may be symbols, but it very well may be both. There may be a reality of a sort and a symbol representation that they're supposed to mean at the same time. So I don't think either should be written out. I think both pretty much need to be there, honestly. On to the next slide. So then I got an image of a couple actual beings that I got the impression were actual ancestors of the stars. So these are what a couple of the beings kind of look like. They just kind of shapes. And then they like gleamed in their bodies with different colors of stars. And that's all I saw really with that vision. And what does that mean? I'm not really sure, but these do look a lot different than the priest of the ancestors of the stars, for instance. So that tends to demonstrate there's a difference in an observational empirical sense between the star being priest and the actual ancestors of the stars. They're not the same being class. On to the next slide. Then at the end I saw a vision of a utopian city at the center of the universe. And this was an AI generated image here. The rest I had all drawn myself. And this really doesn't show you very well what I actually saw. Like what I saw was very circular, and it was very white and very pure looking and high tech and smooth and lots of circles. And it honestly appeared to me like whoever had built it had built like a utopian massive city at the center of like the universe. And again, that may be a symbolic thing I'm seeing in my mind. So the center of all that is, or the roots of the tree of Yggdrasil, or whatever, if you're going to your Norse mythology. But basically you get the picture. Really high-tech utopian city at the center of the universe. It didn't really look like this AI image at all, but I had to put something for this slide, and I tried to draw this. I really did, but I failed miserably. I'm a very, very mediocre artist. I've got a lot of spiritual power in my art, a tremendous amount, but my actual skills at drawing are pretty mediocre, and I'm trying to improve them. I really am. So the next slide. So now we get to the actual analysis, and that's where this channel, I think it's more interesting and differentiates itself from a lot of other channels. I don't think there's any other channel like this where it's actually trying to do a reasonably objective anthropological study of the spirit realm itself through first-hand, vision of it. There's a few anthropologists out there that actually study things similar, but most of them aren't doing it from a first-hand perspective. In fact, I doubt there's anybody doing this. I highly doubt it, because academia would never stand for it. Maybe it can change, but anyway, who cares? I'll do it anyway. So, are we talking about being types, cultures, religions, myths, or what is going on here? Now, this is a real fascinating subject to me, because in discovering this anthropology of the spirit realm, in discovering this the ancestors of the stars, I really couldn't shake the connection that the evidence had, showing me that the ancestors of the stars could potentially be connected to dragons and reptiles and snakes. And if that's the case, that would be really fascinating. And I'm not making the claim that this is by any means certain, but I am making the claim that the evidence tends to support, at least at above a 50% level so far, and I'm sure I'm going to have a lot more visions, particularly if I try to get them on this subject, that when my channel is referring to the ancestors of the stars, they were honestly talking about something similar to dragons. Like dragons in the modern day are representations of these ancestors that existed before the time of the stars. Now, am I necessarily right? No, but that's why I'm showing you my evidence and giving you my interpretations of that evidence, and you can make your own decision. And I'm not fully decided on this matter myself. I just think there's enough evidence to seriously at least consider the possibility that these ancestors of the stars, the beings that existed before the stars, that apparently were powerful and well respected enough to have people build a religion out of them. Well, what is that symbol in our modern human culture? It's the dragon / the snake / even the reptilian, aka David Icke. So, what do we got here on this slide? There's a significant amount of evidence here that, at a very minimum, this ancestor group called the ancestors of the stars, actually exists within the deep mind spiritual astral planes. And now what it actually is, that's a different matter. Again, might be dragons, might not, but does it actually exist? Well, there's probably a religion that is focused on it. And I got a number of images that all suggested that this group actually exists. Now, could this group be a mythological construct of the astral plane, like something that astral plane created as a myth for itself? Yeah, it certainly could. But could they be real beings from the real past of the before the time of the stars? Could be, because there could be ancestors like that. And what were they? I don't know, but they seem to be represented perhaps as dragon snakes and reptilians in our modern time. Now, I've seen evidence of actual star beings of some type. Like, I had an image of the actual star beings, and that's kind of interesting. Even though the image itself was very underwhelming, it was just shapes with stars in it. Those shapes are not the same as the star priest at all. So there's a difference between the priests of the star beings as exists in the present, in the astral mind, the deep mind, spiritual, imaginary planes, and what I had in my vision. Or then the time in the past when the star beings presumably exist, and we're going on the scale of the time in the actual astral plane. We're not talking about the human material world here. Spiritual practices and or religions, star pyramids. Oh, so are we talking about an actual religion or just a spiritual belief system or spiritual practices? Well, what kind of evidence do I actually have that I actually saw? I saw star pyramids. I saw a priest of the religion. I saw a ceremonial script. I saw ceremonial fans. And I saw a spinning disc. I think I left that out of the presentation. I'm sorry. I wish I could put that back in. But one of the other visions I had about the star beings is I saw this like 4-layered spinning disc, and each of the discs looked kind of ivory green, almost like a Mayan type thing. And there were 4 on top of each other, and each of the wheels would spin and like have a marker on it. They could connect other markers on the other wheels, and it kind of looked, at root like kind of a Mayan calendars type thing, but it definitely wasn't Mayan. This was like alien and star being. I'm just trying to give you an image in your mind of what it was like. So I saw that too. So they had like some sort of perhaps calendar or time measuring system that looked very much similar to what the Mayans might have used for their Mayan calendar. Why was the priest human? What does that suggest? Like, is that just a symbol that my deep mind is using for no particular reason? Does it mean that the star beings or the priest of the star beings are actual humans that exist today, or could or should be? Well, that could be the case. There's definitely people and cults and groups that aren't cults that believe they're star beings, or I don't hear many people talking about being ancestors of the stars, but you've definitely got people that believe they're beings from the stars or aliens or incarnated on the earth. There's actually a lot of people like that out there. So yeah, it could mean that. I tend to think that's what it tends to mean, and at the same time, it's meant to demonstrate to us that this is an actual religion. Does it have a root truth? Like, is there actual star beings behind it, or are they just egregors created by the religion? Don't know, but hard to say. Is this a religion or spiritual system that worships the ancestors of the stars, or the actual ancestors of the star? I see. Is it a group that worships the beings who are the ancestors of the stars, or is it the actual ancestors of the stars? So what am I seeing visions of with all these spinning fans and priests? Well, I'm probably seeing people who worship the ancestors of the stars, like beings or being class or group or civilization in the astral mind, imaginary, and deep mind planes, who actually worship what they call the star beings, or not the star beings, what they call the ancestors of the stars. Now, do the actual ancestors of the stars exist? Is this the same question as asking, perhaps, do dragons exist, do reptilians exist, or are they just myths? And is the power of those myths in the egregor that is created by establishing the myth? And the funny thing is, you may be surprised that it may be more powerful to actually have the beings not exist, but have the egregor exist. So the myth can be more powerful than the reality, because if the egregor exists based on a myth, then that egregor can be accessed and use power right now, where if the actual beings exist, they would have died a long time ago. And then the only way you could access the power is through like artifacts and physical remains of those beings, I would think. So who knows? Like, do they actually exist? Did they actually exist? Or is this just a mythological construct? But even if it's just a mythological construct or a cult on the astral plane, an actual cult that worships ancestors of star beings, if they're good enough or focused enough to create an egregor, and they tend to be in these types of situations, then that egregor exists within the deep mind and the astral plane and can be found and contacted. And power can be drawn with it, or from it, or through its grace onto the material plane, like this everyday plane we're existing in right now. All these things are important things to think about. So on to the next slide. Is it related to light? Definitely seems to be related to the concept of light, because I saw the symbols of the rainbows on the priest of the ancestors of the stars. And light's a really interesting subject. Like, look at it chemically, look at what light actually is, what it actually means. What is it in our universe? And it's a really important, deep subject. Very important. And so don't overlook that, and do some research on it if you're interested. So on to the next slide. So do we actually have dragon, snake, and reptilian ties? Are these related to dragons, serpents, and reptilians? Well, perhaps. There's definitely evidence of dragon scales and snake scales being used in communication systems, and I've seen a very fascinating dragon in my vision. I've seen other dragons, and the symbol and the myth of the dragon is very important in the, even among normal people. Serpents, well, you've got your serpent in the Book of Genesis, in the Garden of Eden, where Lucifer supposedly offers, as a serpent, supposedly offers Adam and Eve the apple of wisdom. So serpents go way back in their mythology, and tied into things like Nagas and Hydras too. I saw a vision of Hydra in my last video. And again, you get into the reptilians, the David Icke type reptilians. These evil reptilian overlords are supposedly controlling the minds of the powerful people on the earth, and thereby controlling the human populations. Do I think there's actually reptilians in the David Icke sense? I like occasionally reading his books and watching his videos. Do I think it's literally true? No, but I think it's pointing in the direction of perhaps a spiritual reality that is true, but maybe different than the way he's expressing it. Like, I think he's on to something. I don't think he's necessarily perfectly right. But so these are all questions to ask, and I'm not here to necessarily give you the answer, at least until I have it. But I am here to give you the evidence, like the empirical evidence, the observable, testable evidence that I actually saw on the astral plane, and I'm using that to establish this theory of perhaps the ancestors of the stars were dragons, reptilians, and or snakes. Interesting. This is the year of the snake, and Lunar New Year is coming up here. I'm going to have a lot more videos like this where I interpret the data that I find. And if I find more information on this, and I'm pretty sure I will, because I touched a lot of subjects here, it's going to be hard to avoid, visions of all these types of things. I'm sure some of them are going to show up again, and I can ask more questions, and I can channel about this. And I probably will. I should. What do I actually think? I think for sure we've got a religion on the astral plane that is focused on worshiping a group called the Ancestors of the Stars. I think that's set in stone now. What those are those dragons, reptilians in human mythology? Maybe. There's evidence for it. What's the nature of these beings? Like, what are they all about? Well, if they're about light, that could mean they're about energy, or could mean they're about light in the sense of light that overcomes darkness, so they would be positive polarity beings. But I really don't know. These are just, I'm using the evidence, presenting it to you, and trying to figure it out myself, and we're all trying to figure this out here. And if I get a record of these out there, then maybe at some point in the future someone will figure this out. But I'm sure even I will get more answers to these questions as my visions continue. So I appreciate you all being here and staying with me for this. How long is it? 34 minutes so far. Okay, so it's only a little longer than normal. This one took longer than normal because it took like multiple days of visions and things. Sometimes it's going to go that way. Sometimes I'll just do a short like vision report. So let me know what you think. If you've got any ideas about this presentation, or about the dragons or the serpents or the reptilians or this cult that I seem to have come across on my, visions within the astral, deep mind, imaginary, spiritual planes, well, let me know. Definitely subscribe if you haven't. If you're interested in this, you probably see what I already recognize, which is that there's some real potential here. Like, I think we're way ahead of the traditional occult with what's going on here on this channel. I really think we are. I think this is going to go places. I think if you're drawn and attracted to it, then you perhaps sense that too. So you definitely would be the type of person I would want watching the channel. So have a good day, people, and we'll see you at the next video. All right.